Sodium valproate, also known as Epilim, is a very effective drug for treating epilepsy. For some people, it's the only medicine that can control their seizures. But for many years, it has been known to increase the risk of physical disability or developmental problems in children exposed to the drug in the womb. And there could be as many as 400 people affected in this country. So why has it taken so long to get warnings about these dangers onto boxes of the tablets? And just who is responsible when something goes wrong? Who pays for the care of children who have been harmed? The drug company or the state, which is responsible for regulation? Ethna O'Brien reports.
It is estimated that up to 400 children in Ireland may have been born with developmental problems because of exposure in the womb to an epilepsy drug called valproate, marketed as Epilim.
I am a mother of 3 adult children, Harry, Lee and Lorcan, who have all been affected by the exposure of valproate. 2 of my 3 boys require lifelong care. They have been robbed of all the joys of life. Unfortunately, I am far from alone.
In London this week, the European Medicines Agency held a public meeting amid growing concerns that patients were not being warned of the risks of this drug to pregnant women. The medicine, manufactured by drug company Sanofi, has been known to cause birth defects in up to 40% of children who have been exposed to the drug in the womb. Giving evidence at the hearing was Meath mother Karen Keely.
I have been mourning my children since the day they came into my life. Unfortunately, in Ireland, there are repeated efforts to discuss this with the Minister of Health have so far been fruitless. Neither Sanofi nor anyone else has been held accountable for what has happened, and this is just not good enough.
Valproate, or Epilim, is the most commonly prescribed epilepsy drug in Ireland and has been around for more than 40 years.
It was really throughout the 1970s and into the 80s, I suppose, that more studies were published linking valproate to physical disabilities in children. By the mid-90s, it was becoming very much widely accepted that there were risks associated with the drug in terms of spina bifida, disabilities like cleft lip, cleft palate, and then I suppose later on throughout the 90s and into the mid-2000s it became very clear that there were also a wide variety of developmental issues associated with the drug. So these range from delays for children in terms of walking and talking, in terms of cognition and learning, intellectual capabilities, and indeed things like autism and ADHD.
This week it also emerged that a subcommittee on the safety of medicines in the UK were aware of the risks to unborn children from the drug as far back as 1973. It wrote that there is some evidence of a higher than average incidence of congenital abnormalities in infants born of epileptic mothers. However, they went on to say that they didn't want to inform the general public because the evidence was not sufficiently conclusive and it could give rise to fruitless anxiety. So despite knowledge of the risks going back 40 years, thousands of children across Europe and Ireland have been harmed by this drug because their parents were not informed.
Many of the families have children who are in their 20s, into their 30s. I believe that the oldest person with fetal valproate syndrome in the UK is in their mid-40s. And so, this has been known for a long time, and unfortunately there are still children being born. We're aware of one family who have a 4-year-old in Ireland. So these issues still, unfortunately, have not been fully solved.
Susan Dolan has been taking Epilim for more than 30 years. She is worried that her son Bobby, who has autism and epilepsy, is one of those affected.
Bobby's a beautiful boy. He's a 20-year-old man. He has extra needs. He has daily seizures, so he cannot be left on his own. Bobby has problems with social interactions. That's where his autism comes in. So if somebody's talking to him or a situation is ongoing, he might find it difficult to understand exactly what people are saying. So life is hard for Bobby. There was an article in the paper 7 to 10 years ago, and it mentioned a possible link between a mother taking valproate and her child being born with autism. It mentioned autism in particular. At this stage, Bobby had been diagnosed with Asperger's. And again, I went through the same emotion of what I've taken to keep me safe has now made my son unwell. I never thought for 1 second that it would give my son these conditions. The guilt you feel is tremendous. You just think, what have I done to my child?
It was finally agreed in 2014 that the public should be more effectively warned about the risks of the drug to unborn children. Despite the publication of warnings on leaflets and HSE information booklets, campaigners say not enough has been done to inform everyone who might be affected.
Last December we conducted a survey at Epilepsy Ireland of women in a particular age group, 16 to 45, who are taking Epilum. And we found that only 56% of them said that they'd had discussions with their health team in the past 3 years on this issue. We would have hoped that the vast majority, if not all patients, would have been able to say that in the affirmative.
Last year, the drug manufacturer Sanofi made a commitment that warnings would be placed on boxes in Ireland. Today, Sanofi told Primetime that new boxes were approved in May this year and are now on the market. However, there are still boxes available without any warnings on them.
Recently, I had to get a box and I actually looked at it and there's no warning on the outside of the box. There is an inner leaflet and it's in very small writing that valproate will cause fetal abnormalities, but it's not on the outside of the box. And if you do get a blister pack, there's no information leaflet or there's no sticker on the outside to say, check with your doctor, check with your pharmacist.
It's a source of great frustration, to be honest, that this still hasn't happened. It's been mooted for the last 3 years and it was committed to by the drug company that this will be in place by the end of last year. It was again committed to earlier this year that these actual warnings would be on the outside of boxes. So it's extremely frustrating that this hasn't happened, because it simply means that people are, may still not be aware of the risks and may now be at higher risks of having children born with disabilities that are totally avoidable if these warnings had actually been in place.
Sanofi told Primetime that sodium valproate is an important molecule that epileptic women continue to rely on to avoid a potentially fatal seizure during their lifetime, including during pregnancy. They went on to say that everyone in the healthcare system has a role to ensure that the risks as well as the benefits are understood. But families across Ireland are worried about what this drug might have done to their children. They now want to know who is responsible and who will look after the welfare of these children.
Listening to the hearing that took place on Tuesday, you start to question the manufacturers. When they started to get an inkling that this was showing up, why wasn't that publicised? A lot of parents will understand. We're looking for future care for our son. He will need lifelong care. People have to stand up, and people are standing up at last and saying, this has to stop. The book has to stop somewhere.
Ethna O'Brien reporting. I'm joined now in studio by solicitor Raymond Bradley, managing partner with Malcolmson Law. Raymond, that question raised by Susan Dolan, who is accountable, is a question a lot of people will be asking themselves. What do you think?
I think there are a multitude of entities and individuals who may be accountable, but the issue that strikes me most is why we haven't learned from the mistakes of the past. This particular catastrophe is very similar to the thalidomide catastrophe, and in that instance there was an ineffectual recall, and in this instance it appears the same has occurred. Also, labelling was inadequate. Labelling was often of a level that was incapable of being understood by the general public. Risks were maybe placed on the third page of a patient information leaflet rather than on the outside of a box in clearly discernible and understandable methods. This is a serious failure yet again of regulation.
And what's the cause of that failure, do you think?
I think if it has taken 40 years since the introduction of the product on the market in the United Kingdom and 33 years since the introduction of the product here in Ireland to ascertain that it had this risk, that suggests that the regulation watchdog is not doing its job. And it may be a combination of lack of notification of adverse reactions, lack of post-monitoring and surveillance in relation to use of pharmaceutical products. The technology is there today to maintain a database that has all the detail in relation to each pharmaceutical product used by every individual. And if that was the situation, we would know today how many silent victims have been affected by this particular drug. And it should be remembered, it's not just a drug used in relation to epilepsy. It's used in relation to other conditions, like bipolar disorder. So we don't know the extent of the injuries, loss of quality of life that has now occurred.
Okay. Obviously, a lot of people who are affected by this are going to be worried about their children's continuing care throughout their lifetime. They may need a lifetime of care. The brutal question is, who is going to pay for that?
That will be determined based upon the state of knowledge, who knew the risks, when they knew the risks, whether the risks were adequately communicated in the light of the knowledge at the time.
Okay, so that will be for the courts to determine?
That'll be for the courts to determine at a later date.
Okay, Raymond Bradley, thank you indeed for joining us. I'm also joined by Dr. Joan Gilvary, Medical Director with the Health Products Regulatory Authority, which regulates medicines and ensures that they are as safe as possible. Dr. Gilvary, thank you for joining us. Whose fault is it that there are 400 children approximately who have been harmed by this drug?
The first thing I'd like to say is one can't be moved by the stories we've heard in that clip you've put out this evening. I have met with Catherine Keely and patient organisations on numerous occasions over the past number of years, and I would like to thank them for their participation in the first ever public hearing that was held on this issue in London just last Tuesday. This is an extremely effective drug and may be the only treatment that works for particular groups of patients. Since the drug was first licensed back in the late 70s, we have known it can be associated with physical defects, and the product information contained those warnings. And indeed, our predecessors, the National Drug Advisory Board, the Irish Medicines Board, over the past number of years have repeatedly issued warnings on this. The issue that we're talking about this evening is neurodevelopmental delay. And the theory and the research only became available in the last number of years on this issue. And as soon as it became available, we reacted. There was a European-wide review, started in 2013, the outcome was in 2014, and we have communicated widely and repeatedly with the relevant stakeholders.
And yet the message, with respect, is not getting through, it would appear, to the women who are most directly affected, because the Epilepsy Ireland did a survey of women of childbearing age who are on Epilim in December of last year, and 1/5 of them, 20%, had no idea about the ill effects, and only 56% of them, just over half, had had a face-to-face discussion with their medical practitioner about the possible side effects. So it would appear that even after the public information campaign that you're talking about, women were not getting the information.
And I've heard those statistics, and I am concerned about those statistics. The only thing I can say to you is that we have repeatedly communicated and made tools available for patients and healthcare professionals. There's patient alert cards, like a little credit card that the pharmacist gives out. 62,000 of those have been sent to 2,500 pharmacies in the last year.
But surely, with respect, Dr. Gilvary, surely your job is to make sure that the information gets to the people, to make sure that the drug is not prescribed by doctors or is not dispensed by pharmacists to women who are planning to get pregnant, hoping to get pregnant, or have become pregnant.
You are absolutely correct. Our job is to analyse the data and get the information to doctors and pharmacists and patients. And that's exactly what we have done. But we are not sitting in the consultant's clinic and in the surgery when the doctor is having that discussion with the patient. All we can do is arm them with the information to make an informed decision and to discuss the options with the patient.
But if the message isn't getting through to a large proportion of the women involved, either you're falling down on your job, the doctors are falling down on their job, or the pharmacists are falling down on their job.
And that's the reason why we're now in the middle of another European-wide review, and got the information and the hearing from the patients the other day and asked their ideas. How can we improve this? We got information from neurologists and psychiatrists across Europe. How can we improve this? We're meeting with doctors here in Ireland next month. We're meeting with specialists all over Europe. The outcome of this review to see, can we do more to get this information? Will be available in the next couple of months.
Let's take a very simple thing, is the warning on the box. Now, a lot of people are not going to read the leaflet that comes with it, particularly if they've been taking this drug for years. What about the warning on the box, which we are told by the drug company is now being rolled out, and yet we saw in EFNA's report a box of these tablets bought 2 weeks ago with no warning on it. How on earth is that acceptable?
Because the warning on the box is just one of the methods of getting this information.
But surely it's the most visible thing to the patient.
It could be the most visible thing, but there are also, as I discussed, patient alert cards, there's patient guides, there's prescribing checklists, there's pharmacists give the information. They are the last most important people to get the information to the patient before they take the medicine. Okay,
but if we have now decided that it is important to put this message on the box to give the best chance of getting this warning across, and there are still boxes, old boxes, being given out without it, either those boxes should be recalled or the pharmacist should be given a sticker to put on the box. Surely that's not beyond the system.
All the product that is in production at the moment
Sorry, with respect, that's not the question I asked you. I asked you about stock that is existing in the system and is still being given out.
The stock is not being replaced because we need to keep this vital medicine available. We can't run out of stock.
Sure.
And the one message I'd like to get across tonight is, for people listening to this, do not stop your medicine. This is a vital medicine. It can have life-threatening effects. You need to discuss the risks with your doctor and discuss the benefits and the risks of this medicine.
And are you happy that medical professionals have now got the message and will fully discuss this with their patients?
We've made every effort and repeated attempts to get the information to medical professionals. If there's more we can do, we will do it. And that is why we're in the middle of a second European review in the last 3 years to discuss this most important issue.
OK, Dr. Gilvary, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Miriam.